Hi, this is a video about behavior and guidance for child development classes. When I talk about behavior and guidance, I refer to a book called Becoming the Parent You Want to Be. It is also available in Spanish, Como Ser un Gran Padre. It is, in my opinion, one of the best parenting books that has come out. It is a little bit older, and so there's some things that probably need to be updated, but it has some great information there about how to establish common values as a family, why timeout is not particularly useful, and then also what are children's feelings? How do children's bodies grow? It's very useful for families who have children under 5 years and even children who are a little bit older. And so there's 2 chapters in there that talk about behavior and guidance that I think are particularly useful and break down behavior into some simplistic ways in which we can understand and respond. So first, think about how do we become who we are? What families have in common the world around is that they are the place where people learn who they are and how to be that way. And so if we're going to understand how we learn to behave the way we are, we need to look at our families. We need to look at our own background. What pushes our buttons is often something determined by the way we were raised culturally. And behavior tends to push the buttons of teachers in different ways. We all have different hot button issues. There are 4 reasons children might have difficult behavior. The first is that it's not developmentally appropriate to ask them what you're asking them to do. And so they may be behaving in a way that's developmentally appropriate for who they are at their age. Babies cry. It is their way of communicating. So crying in infancy is a developmentally appropriate behavior. That doesn't mean it's easy to listen to when a child is crying through the night, but it is developmentally appropriate. Sometimes a toddler who doesn't have words yet and all of the language is stuck somewhere in here and hasn't found its way out yet may bite. It doesn't mean we want them to bite. It doesn't mean that we want to continue that behavior. We're going to help them learn other strategies, other communication tools, but it's developmentally appropriate to see biting crop up a little bit around the age of 1.5. Sometimes the child hasn't been taught yet. And this is particularly true of children who have gone through the developmentally appropriate age but are still displaying the behavior. So a 3 or 4-year-old who's biting may not have learned that that doesn't get them what they want. Maybe it does get them what they want. Maybe when they bite, they get what they want. And therefore, they think it's an appropriate behavior to use. So they need to learn that it isn't, that it hurts other people. There are other ways to get what you want. And language is really useful. There's other ways to communicate. So maybe there's something they can learn. And then the final 2 are really important. They're the unmet needs of a child. Sometimes behavior comes from an unmet emotional need. When children are stressed or they're experiencing trauma, behaviors will crop up. Right now during COVID-19 and shelter in place, the world is really unsettling for children. So I'm hearing stories of children's behaviors cropping up. They're whinier, possibly clingier, maybe having more tantrums. All those different behaviors are common to crop up when children are under stress. And our children, just like we, are under stress right now. Unmet physical needs is really important. Children who are hungry, who are overtired, will have an acceleration of certain behaviors because they don't have the ability, the emotional ability to maintain, just like we don't, when they're hungry and tired. Human beings need physical things in order to be consistent with who they are. And just like adults struggle when they're hungry or tired, children will too. So there's 12 strategies for effective limit setting. The first thing you want to know is which of those 4 reasons is the reason for this behavior. And you do that through observation. You observe a child's behavior over time. You see what comes before the behavior and after the behavior so that you can start to form some theories about why it's happening. If you're working with children's difficult behavior, you want to use these 12 strategies to help. Little pause there. Let's come back. So the 12 strategies for effective limit setting. The first one is honor the impulse, and we'll look at each of these in detail. The second is active listening. The third is sportscasting. The fourth is facilitating. The fifth is the use of I messages. The sixth is setting positive limits. The seventh is give a choice. We'll look at all of these in detail. You may want to screenshot this list and put it somewhere where you can see it. Give information. There are natural consequences to behavior sometimes. Redirect children's behaviors. Invite their initiative before behaviors show up, and set the stage for future success. Now, before you use any one of these limit setting strategies, it's really important to maintain your own emotional calm. You want to know yourself and know what's hard for you. You also want to have eaten normally, slept well, and had your own physical needs met. If your emotional needs aren't being met and there's some emotional crisis, for example, I taught days after I found out my father died. That was a very difficult time to be in the classroom. This is 15 years ago now, but that emotional grief was with me in the classroom. I needed to know that and understand that so I could pause before I responded and make sure I was responding thoughtfully. So you want to make sure your own emotional and physical needs are met before you try and use any of these strategies. So remember the 4 reasons for difficult behavior. At all times, remember those reasons. And only observation will help you figure out which is the reason. Every behavior has an impulse. It's usually a healthy impulse. Usually the behavior is something the child needs. We need to remember that children are not behaving for reasons that don't get them something. Behavior comes from a place where there's a reason for it. It might be to see what that sound is on the other side of the fence, like with this child. It might be to get the attention of the adults around them, which is also really important to a child. They need to know that they're seen and heard. The behavior is the issue, not the child. We want to honor that the child has something they need and not label the child as the behavior. A child is not a biter. A child is someone who is biting right now to get something they want or need. How can the child do what they're trying to do? So think about the impulse. What is it they're trying to do? What is the healthy impulse underneath the unhealthy behavior? Listen actively to children when you're intervening in behavior. Listening actively starts with observation. It starts with really observing a child during that moment before, during, and after a behavior. It's a learned skill. We don't listen naturally as human beings, many of us. A lot of us as children didn't learn how to be good listeners. We practice what's modeled for us. So if we didn't have active listening modeled for us as children, we have to work at it a little bit harder. The children in our classroom will become better listeners if we can be better listeners for them. Listen first, then talk. Tell me what's going on here. Listen to the child. Listen more than you talk. That's hard for us as teachers. We like to talk sometimes. Really listen. Listen to more than the words. Listen to the facial expression. Listen to what's happening around you. Listen to the tone of the voice. Use your body to show that you're listening. You can see this father is really listening to this son. It's a beautiful photo that in a snapshot shows you active listening. Sportscasting. Sportscasting works particularly well in conflict with others. It's describing what you see. You both want this hat. You're both saying it's yours. Be objective. Remember, don't put your opinions or theories in there. It honestly doesn't matter who had it first. It only matters to the teacher. It doesn't matter to the children. Be descriptive and stop to listen while you're sportscasting. Let children respond to what you're saying. Facilitate. For older children with verbal skills, this is particularly useful. You want to offer opportunities for the children to come up with solutions. Use open-ended questions to help children solve their own conflicts. For example, I see you want Nathan's toy. Is there another way you can ask for it? You're giving children an opportunity to be the problem solvers. The more opportunities you give them to do that, the better they will be able to do it throughout their lives. They won't always be looking to somebody else to solve their problems. Use I messages. No one can make someone feel something. Your feelings are your own. Be very, very careful about any sentence that starts with, you I use iMessages so constantly, it's harder for me to do this. You made me so mad. That mad is yours. That emotion is yours. Often our emotions are tied to our whole history of situations similar to the one we're seeing in front of us. By giving the child the power over making you feel something, we take away our own accountability for our emotions. So be very, very careful. Your emotion is yours. The reason that's important, among many, many other reasons, is that we want children to have responsibility for their own emotions. No emotion is a reason for a behavior. No emotion is an excuse for a behavior. Behaviors will come from unmet emotional needs. But as we get older and we learn to control how we feel and how we respond to how we feel, we want to make sure we're planting seeds that the emotion and the response to the emotion are two different things. We can have the emotion and then think about our response before we respond and act. That's a critical emotional skill for children and adults to learn, and it's one we're losing. We choose how we respond to our emotions, and we choose which emotions to focus on. We don't always focus on the same emotion. When we blame others for our emotions, they learn to do the same thing. So an I statement is, when I saw you do this and you did that, I felt this way. So you're owning the emotion, you're owning what you saw. It's very specific. Sometimes a because is needed too, because I was worried for your safety. Ask for what you want. It's important that children stay safe in the classroom. I want children to be safe here in the classroom. Tell me what's happening. Positive limit setting. Imagine a world without limits. If any of you have seen The Purge, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's a movie where for 24 hours, there are no laws. There are no consequences for any behavior for adults at all. Murder, all of it, and no consequences. It would be a terrifying world. If I lived in that world for that 24 hours, I would hide behind many walls with many, many defenses. It would be terrifying. I might even buy guns to defend myself, and I don't believe in guns. I don't believe in violence. And so it's really important to think about how we respond to limits and how children. So if we respond to limits with fear, with defensiveness, to lack of limits with fear and defensiveness, how can we ask anything different of children? When we have very clear limits, in our classroom, children are safe. In our classroom, children are respectful. In our classroom, children are responsible. Those are three very clear limits, especially when we look at a child and say, I'm noticing what you're doing and I'm wondering if this is safe. What do you think? And we're having a conversation where they really are thinking about safety. Children know exactly what to expect. When children have no limits whatsoever, it's terrifying. Positive limit setting is setting limits in a way that give children something they can do, that focus on them helping to understand the limit, not just saying no all the time. No is a word that, if you can, you should remove from your vocabulary. One of the memes of toddlers in the Western culture is that toddlers say no, mine, a lot. I think we have to really examine what we say to children before they're toddlers to understand why that happens. If every time a toddler reaches for my coffee cup, I say no, and I'm expecting the child to stop, what I'm teaching that child is that the word no is the same as stop. And it has the power to make everybody do whatever it is that you want them to do. If they reach for my coffee cup and I say, no, mine, that's mine, and I'm expecting them to let go and not reach for it, then I'm also teaching them that the word mine is a powerful word. You say it and you get to keep it. So it's no wonder that toddlers get very confused about no and mine in the toddler years. So let's think about how we use our words if we want children to think about their words. Positive limit setting may be, that's the coffee I'm drinking right now. Did you want a cup too? Let's see if we can find a cup. So redirection to something they can have, instead of just simple quick phrases that don't explain anything to them. Give a choice. When possible, give a choice. My favorite example of this is toddler snacks when I was a young teacher. We used to offer children choices of these plastic cups. You could have a red cup or you could have a blue cup. Which cup do you want? In grocery stores, you could give simple choices to children. Which gallon of milk do you want? Choices are very, very powerful for children. They're living in a world with all kinds of limits on their ability to choose, their power to operate in the world. So by giving them a choice, we're giving them some control. Make sure it's a choice you want a child to have. When you end with okay and a question mark type tone in your voice, you're giving a fake choice to a child. Let's change your diaper, okay? That gives the power to the child and gives them the impression they can say no. Another choice might be, do you want to hop to the change table like a bunny or crawl like a kitten? We need to change your diaper. That's a choice I'm willing to live with. We're going to go to grandma's, okay? Well, maybe it's not okay. Maybe the child doesn't want to go, but we are going, whether the child wants to or not. So be very, very careful with your choices. Don't give more choices than the child can handle. Typically, the child can handle the number of choices as their age group when they're under 5. So a 2-year-old can handle about 2 or 3 choices at most. Don't give more than that. Be clear, be concrete, and be concise. Give information. Children need to understand the world they don't understand. It's particularly useful with situations where children don't understand something. It works very well with verbal children. They want to understand the world. They're curious, investigatory, and just as much about social interactions as they are about the physical environment they're exploring. Gear the explanation to the children's developmental level. Don't give more information than the child's ready for. So a 2-year-old needs a simple explanation. A 3 or 4 or 5-year-old may need a more complex explanation. It helps children make good choices when they understand. Information is very, very useful to children. They don't know the world the way we do. They don't know that if you pull a cat's tail, the cat may scratch you. That's a natural consequence. We want to give them information about the world, especially where there are natural consequences that help them understand the world. The stove is hot. See the fire? That's how I cook the food. The fire is really hot. It could hurt you. The cat feels you pulling the tail and it hurts. So the cat might scratch you because they don't understand why you're pulling the tail. That's information about natural consequences in the world. Natural consequences are going to happen whether we're there or not. Giving information about that helps the child understand it. Redirect a child's behavior. I want to know what that sound is over the fence. See the wheels on the trike? I'm worried they're going to wheel away and you could get hurt. Here's a tree. Let's see if we can climb up in the tree to see what's happening over the fence. Find activities that meet their needs in that moment. Redirection is best done when we understand the unmet need of the child. Invite children's initiative. If a child is really wanting your attention and you're discovering that their behavior comes from a desire for your attention, ask them to help plan. Involve them in your projects. Ask them how you should do things. Inviting children's initiative gives them some control over their environment, and children have very little control. So if you can give them some control where it's appropriate, children will feel more engaged and invested in your environment. And then set the stage for future success. You probably all have had a teacher at some point who didn't really believe in you. And you know what that felt like. That felt dismissive. Maybe you felt unheard, unvalued. Maybe you stopped believing in yourself. Many of the people who hate math had a teacher who didn't believe in their ability to do math and dismissed them. I do not like those math teachers. I almost became a math teacher to avoid that happening to more children. It's really important we believe in children, especially when they're struggling, that we know they can do this, and we're going to be right there helping them until they do. We want the environment to be set up to be successful. We want the environment to have as many choices as possible so children are not fighting over the one shovel in the sandbox. We also want children to know that we believe in them. And that comes from not just the words we say, it comes from what we believe. If in your head you believe this child is always going to be aggressive and biting, it does not matter the words that come out of your mouth. The tone of your voice and your facial expression will tell the child that. We have to really picture, envision a child growing beyond that behavior, becoming caring, empathetic, and compassionate. We have to picture that in our heads and know it's possible. And then be able to tell a child, I'll be right here with you while you figure it out. But I know you're going to figure out how to do this. And until you do, I'm here to help. It's a very different message than stop biting, stop biting, stop biting, stop biting. So really think about if you have a blind spot around a child, why? Talk to other teachers. Find that hope for the child. It's the most important thing you can do when it comes to helping with behaviors. There are some resources here. I will link some of these in our module. I will also put the PowerPoint itself in the module so you can go back and look at some of these slides slower than it did in the video. Thank you.